Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome back to another episode of Cat Tales, a Warrior Cats reread podcast. I'm your host, Coffee, and today we're going to be reading chapters 16 through 19 of Rising Storm. Where we last left off, a patrol of ThunderClan warriors, including Mousefur, ran back to camp because they had been attacked by mystery cats. Nobody knows who they are. So Fireheart runs to check it out, and he sees Whitethroat. He assumes Whitethroat is the one who unfortunately killed Running Wind. Very sad. So he attacks Whitethroat, chases him onto the Thunderpath, and Whitethroat unfortunately gets hit by a monster. And just before he dies, Whitethroat looks behind him and looks as if he wants to say something. Fireheart turns around and sees none other than Tigerclaw himself. So he's back! Yay! Not yay, very not yay. We're gonna get right into chapter 16, quote, Fireheart's claws felt rooted to the Thunderpath as he stared at the cat that had cast a menacing shadow over his life for so long. There was no need for any pretense of shared clan loyalty now. Tigerclaw was an outcast, the enemy of all cats who followed the warrior code. The fiery evening sun bled through the tips of the trees, its orange rays glowing on the dark pelt of the massive tabby. Across the silence of the deserted Thunderpath, Tigerclaw sneered at Fireheart. Is chasing puny cats to their deaths the best you can do to defend your territory? Fireheart's mind cleared in a heartbeat, leaving his body pulsing with strength and cold fury. He stared straight into Tigerclaw's eyes as the thundering of another monster stirred his ear fur. He held his ground as it whipped by him, another roaring at its heels. But Fireheart felt no fear. In the fleeting gap between the two monsters, he focused on Tigerclaw and sprang. Holy aura farming! That is a crazy aura farming moment. Tigerclaw's eyes widened with surprise as Fireheart crashed into him, claws unsheathed and hissing with rage. They rolled together across the grass into the cover of the trees. Fireheart drew strength from the familiar sense of the forest. His territory now, not Tigerclaw's. And the pair struggled wildly, flattening the brittle undergrowth and gouging deep scars in the ground with their claws. Fireheart had gotten a good grip on Tigerclaw in his first pounce. He could feel every one of the tabby's ribs. Tigerclaw had lost weight, but his muscles felt hard beneath his thick pelt, and Fireheart quickly realized that exile had not diminished the warrior's strength. Tigerclaw crouched and leaped upward, twisting in midair. Fireheart felt himself being flung from Tigerclaw's back, felt the impact of the parched ground as he landed on his side. He gasped for the air that had been knocked from his lungs and struggled to his paws. He wasn't fast enough. Tigerclaw pounced on him, pinning him to the ground with claws that seemed to pierce Fireheart to the bone. Fireheart yowled in agony, but the massive Tom held him down, and he smelled the stench of crow food as Tigerclaw stretched his neck forward to hiss into Fireheart's ear. Are you listening, kitty pet? I will kill you and all your warriors one by one. And he means that. So Fireheart is kind of freaked out by this. He begins to notice more unfamiliar cat scents surrounding them, including Whitethroat. Has Whitethroat been part of the rogues this whole time? Fireheart manages to kick Tigerclaw off of him, seeing Mousefur and Whitestorm spring into battle from the bushes, but they're still heavily outnumbered. So they keep fighting. Tigerclaw is about to land a big swipe on Fireheart when a flash of gray fur bowls into Tigerclaw, knocking him back. Graystripe had come to save them. Fireheart realizes that Graystripe brought a whole RiverClan patrol, and now the rogues are outnumbered. Fireheart and Graystripe work together to drive Tigerclaw back, swiping step for step, and eventually pinning him down and pressing his face into the dirt. What a power move. The rogues finally flee because they realize they're too outnumbered, and Tigerclaw escapes from Fireheart's grasp, running away. Quote, as the wails of the rogue cats faded away, the warriors shook the dust from their pelts and licked their wounds. Fireheart realized for the first time that Bluestar's son, Stonefur, was among the RiverClan cats. Is anyone badly hurt? He gasped. The cats shook their heads, even Mousefur, who was still bleeding from the first attack. We should return to our own territory, meowed Stonefur. ThunderClan thanks you for your help. Fireheart dipped his head respectfully. Rogue cats threaten all of us, Stonefur replied. We couldn't leave you to fight them alone. Whitestorm shook his muzzle, scattering drops of blood. He looked at Graystripe. It's good to fight beside you again, friend. What brought you here? He heard Fireheart's yowl from 4 trees where we were patrolling, Stonefur answered for Graystripe. He persuaded us to come and help. Thanks, answered Fireheart warmly. All of you. Stonefur nodded and turned away into the trees. His patrol followed. Fireheart touched Graystripe with his muzzle as he passed, sorry to see him leave, and painfully aware that there was no time to say as much as he wanted. See you, Graystripe, he meowed. He felt Graystripe's purr rumbling through his thick coat. See you, murmured the Grey Warrior. Fireheart shivered as the sun finally disappeared from the forest. He could see Mousefur's eyes shining in the dark, tense with pain. Then he felt a fresh wave of sorrow as he remembered the price that had been paid for the rogue cat's attack. Running Wind's body would be growing cold by now, and this was not the only untimely death Tigerclaw had brought to the forest that day. Fireheart looked at Whitestorm. Can you and Mousefur get Running Wind back to camp without me? The white warrior narrowed his eyes curiously, but said nothing, and nodded. Fireheart twitched his ear. I'll follow you back soon. There's something I must do first. Scheming Fireheart is back. I think Mousefur looks very in pain because I think Running Wind is her brother, which is horrible. Like, she witnessed her brother get killed, if that is true. That was a really short chapter. That's it. Moving on to chapter 17, quote, Fireheart padded heavily back to the Thunderpath. The smell of Tigerclaw and the rogue cats was still heavy in the air, but he could hear no noises other than birdsong and the whispering of the breeze through the leaves. In the calm after the battle, he noticed how strongly the scent of ShadowClan mingled with the other smells. Had there been other ShadowClan cats, as well as Whitethroat, among the rogues? He wondered if the sickness in the ShadowClan camp was so bad that its warriors were imposing their own exile and joining up with Tigerclaw's band of outcasts for protection. Or perhaps the scent had simply wafted from the territory on the other side of the Thunderpath. Fireheart stared across the hard gray path at the body of the black and white warrior. If Whitethroat had joined the rogue cats because his clan was too sick to support him, it didn't explain the look of horror on his face when he'd seen Tigerclaw. Why would Whitethroat have been so terrified if Tigerclaw were now his leader? With a flicker of guilt, Fireheart suddenly wondered if Whitethroat had stumbled on Running Wind's body by sheer accident, after Tigerclaw had led the attack on the ThunderClan patrol. But what was he doing in ThunderClan territory? And where was Little Cloud? There were too many questions, and none of the answers made sense. One thing was certain. Fireheart could not leave Whitethroat's body to be battered by monsters on the Thunderpath. It was quiet now, and Fireheart crossed to the middle and grasped the warrior's scruff in his teeth. He dragged him gently across the verge on the far side, hoping that his clanmates would find him soon and give him an honorable burial. Whatever Whitethroat had or had not done, StarClan would judge him now. Another unsolved mystery. I wonder why Whitethroat was so terrified of Tigerclaw. I mean, it makes sense. Tigerclaw is terrifying, but I wonder if there's a specific reason. I highly doubt Whitethroat would be with the rogues. I mean, you never know, but it doesn't seem like that would be the case. Running Wind's body is laid out in the middle of the moonlit camp when Fireheart returns. The clan is sitting in the shadows, clearly distressed. Bluestar is pacing back and forth by Running Wind's body, muttering to herself, showing none of the quiet dignity she had had for Lionheart, who had died a few seasons earlier. Quote, Fireheart could feel the clan watching him as he approached their leader. Bluestar looked up, and he felt a stab of alarm when he saw that her eyes were clouded with fear and shock. They say Tigerclaw did this, she rasped. It might have been one of his rogues. How many are there? I don't know, Fireheart admitted. It had been impossible to count in the thick of battle. Many. Bluestar began to shake her head again, but Fireheart knew she had to be told everything, whether she wanted to know what was going on in the forest or not. Tigerclaw wants vengeance against ThunderClan, he reported. He told me he was going to kill our warriors one by one. Behind him, the clan exploded into horrified yowls. Fireheart let them wail, keeping his eyes fixed on Bluestar. He felt his heart flutter like a trapped bird as he begged StarClan to give her the strength to cope with this openly declared threat. Gradually, the clan fell silent, and Fireheart waited with them for Bluestar to speak. An owl screeched in the distance as it dived through the trees. Bluestar lifted her head. It's only me he wants to kill, she murmured, so quietly that only Fireheart could hear her. For the sake of the clan— No! Fireheart spat, cutting her off. Did Bluestar really intend to give herself up to Tigerclaw? He wants revenge on the whole clan, not just you. She dropped her head. Such vicious betrayal, she hissed. How could I not have seen his treachery when he lived among us? Among us. What a fool I've been. She shook her head, her eyes closed. What a mouse-brained fool. Fireheart's paws trembled. Bluestar seemed determined to torture herself by claiming all responsibility for Tigerclaw's wickedness. With a sickening jolt, he realized he would have to take charge. We must make sure the camp is guarded day and night from now on. Longtail. He looked over at the striped warrior. You will sit guard till noon high. Then he swung his head toward Frostfur. You will take over then. The two cats nodded, and Fireheart bent his head toward Running Wind's body. Mousefur and Brackenfur can bury Running Wind at dawn. Bluestar will sit vigil with them until then. He glanced at his leader, who was staring blankly at the ground, and hoped that she'd heard him. I will join her, meowed Whitestorm. The white warrior shouldered his way through the crowd and sat beside Bluestar, pressing his pelt against hers. The clan takes turns paying respects to Running Wind. As Goldenflower approaches, Fireheart sees her son, and can't help feeling like, quote, he's keeping Tigerclaw's menace alive in the clan. This is just blatantly racist at this point. The kid did nothing wrong. He's just judging him off of looks. Fireheart, stop being racist. You are an immigrant. After Goldenflower, Fireheart pays respects to Running Wind and vows to avenge his death. He spots Darkstripe sitting by the high rock, and his eyes have a brooding thoughtfulness to them. I wonder what he's up to. I still don't trust him. He might be up to something. Fireheart needs to find some comfort, so he decides to visit Yellowfang's den. Quote, Thornpaw sat in the well-trampled grass clearing. Cinderpelt and Yellowfang crouched beside him while he held up a paw for them to examine. Cinderpelt peeled a wad of cobwebs away from the pad, making Thornpaw grimace. "It's still bleeding," the apprentice medicine cat reported. "It should have stopped by now," rasped Yellowfang. "We need to dry this wound before infection creeps in." Cinderpelt's eyes narrowed. "We have those horsetail stems I gathered yesterday. What if we drip some sap onto the cobwebs before we bind them onto the paw? That might stop the bleeding." Yellowfang let out a rumbling purr. "Good thinking." The old medicine cat turned at once and hurried toward her den, while Cinderpelt pressed on Thornpaw's wound with her paw. Only then did she notice Fireheart standing in the tunnel entrance. "Fireheart," she mewed, her blue eyes showing her concern. "Are you okay?" "Just a few scratches and a bite or two," Fireheart replied, padding forward to join them. "I heard it was the road cats who attacked us," meowed Thornpaw, twisting his head to look up at Fireheart. "And that Tigerclaw was with them." "Is it true?" "It's true," Fireheart told him gravely. Cinderpelt glanced at Fireheart, then shook the ginger apprentice's paw. "Here, press on this." "Me?" mewed Thornpaw in surprise. "It's your paw! Hurry up, or you'll have to change your name to No Paw." 10 out of 10, no notes. Thornpaw lifted his paw higher and clamped his jaws carefully around the wound. "Bluestar should never have let Tigerclaw leave the clan," Cinderpelt mewed quietly to Fireheart. "She should have killed him while she had the chance." Fireheart shook his head. "She would never have killed him in cold blood. You know that." Cinderpelt didn't argue. "Why has he come back now? And how could he kill a warrior he once fought beside?" "He told me he's going to kill as many of us as he can," Fireheart meowed darkly. Thornpaw let out a muffled mew, and Cinderpelt's whiskers quivered with shock. "But why?" asked the young medicine cat. Fireheart felt his eyes cloud with anger. "Because ThunderClan didn't give him what he wanted." "What did he want?" "To be leader," Fireheart answered simply. "Well, he'll never get to be leader this way. He's hardly going to make himself popular with the clan if he starts attacking our patrols like this." Doubt flickered through Fireheart at Cinderpelt's confident words. Bluestar was so weak. Who else had the strength to replace her if she... Fireheart winced. He knew the clan's deep fear of the Massive Tom and his road cats. They might prefer to accept Tigerclaw as their leader rather than allow ThunderClan to be destroyed fighting him. "Do you really believe that?" he pressed. The noise of Yellowfang's paw steps as she returned from her den startled them, and all three cats turned. A wad of cobwebs dangled from the old medicine cat's jaws. She dropped them beside Cinderpelt and meowed. "Believe what?" "That Tigerclaw will never become clan leader," Cinderpelt explained. Yellowfang's eyes darkened, and she didn't speak for several long heartbeats. "I think Tigerclaw has the strength of ambition to become whatever he wants," she meowed at last. "Oh, okay. Great. Thanks, Yellowfang." That's the end of chapter 17. It's a quick one today, but I think Yellowfang is right to say that. She has first-hand experience with tyranny, considering her son, Broken Tail, was Cat Hitler, but now we might have Cat Hitler Part 2. Alright, moving on to chapter 18, quote, "Not as long as Fireheart is alive," Cinderpelt argued. Fireheart felt warmed by her faith in him and was about to respond when Thornpaw complained, his words muffled. "It's still bleeding, you know." "Not for long," answered Yellowfang briskly. "Here, Cinderpelt, you make use of these cobwebs while I see to Fireheart's wounds." She nudged the cobwebs closer to Cinderpelt and led Fireheart away to her den. "Wait here," she ordered, and disappeared inside. She emerged with a mouthful of well-chewed herbs. "Now where does it hurt?" "This one's the worst," answered Fireheart, twisting his head to point to a bite on his shoulder. "Right," meowed Yellowfang. She began to rub in some of the herb mixture with a gentle paw. "Bluestar's very shaken," she murmured, not looking up from what she was doing. "I know," Fireheart agreed. "I'm going to organize more patrols at once. That may calm her. It may help calm the rest of the clan, too," Yellowfang remarked. "They're really worried." "They should be." Fireheart winced as Yellowfang pressed the herbs deep into his wound. "How are the new apprentices coming along?" she asked, her voice deceptively casual. Fireheart knew the old medicine cat was offering advice in her wise and indirect fashion. "I'll speed up their training starting at dawn," he told her. Sorrow caught in his throat as he thought of Cloudpaw. The clan needed him now more than ever. No matter what the white apprentice had thought of the warrior code, no cat could deny that he was a brave and skillful fighter. Yellowfang stopped massaging his shoulder. "Have you finished?" he meowed. "Nearly. I'll just put a little on those scratches, then you can go." The old cat blinked at him with wide yellow eyes. "Have courage, young Fireheart. These are dark times for ThunderClan, but no cat could do more than you have." As she spoke, there was a low rumble of thunder in the distance, a hint of menace that sent a chill through Fireheart's fur in spite of the medicine cat's encouragement. When he returned to the main clearing, his wounds numbed by Yellowfang's healing herbs, Fireheart was surprised to find many of the cats still awake. Bluestar, Whitestorm, and Mousefur crouched silently beside Running Wind's body, their grief made plain in their lowered heads and tense shoulders. The other cats lay in small groups, their eyes blinking in the shadows and their ears twitching nervously as they listened to the noises of the forest. Fireheart lay down at the edge of the clearing. The stifling air made his fur prickle. The whole forest seemed to be waiting for the storm to break. A shadow moved near the edge of the clearing. Fireheart swung his head around. It was Darkstripe. Fireheart beckoned the striped warrior closer with his tail. Darkstripe slowly padded toward him. I want you to take out a second patrol as soon as the Dawn Patrol returns tomorrow, Fireheart meowed. From now on, there will be 3 extra patrols every day, and all patrols will have 3 warriors. Darkstripe looked coolly at Fireheart. But I'm taking Fernpaw out training tomorrow morning. Fireheart's fur prickled with irritation. Then take her with you, he snapped. It'll be good experience. We need to speed up apprentice training anyway. Darkstripe's ears flicked, but his gaze remained steady. Yes, Deputy, he murmured, his eyes glittering. Yes, Deputy is passive-aggressive. Didn't love that. There's a bit of a time skip. The next few days are very busy. Packed with more patrols, everyone is exhausted. Fireheart visits Bluestar, noticing with concern that her fur is very matted and she is barely moving. He reports that no patrols have spotted Tigerclaw and the rogues, but she does not respond, closing her eyes. Fireheart leaves the den, very disheartened. The clearing looks so peaceful, it's hard to believe that the clan is under strain. Fireheart's spirits lift as he thinks about how much he'd enjoy Sandstorm's company on a hunting patrol, so he calls her over and she accepts cheerfully. Fireheart spots Brightpaw returning from a water-gathering patrol, and takes her too, as he promised to increase apprentice training. She is not too tired, and joins them. As they leave for the patrol, Fireheart admires how Sandstorm's muscles flex under her fur, and he's clearly a little obsessed with her, like, now he's taking notice of her. She spots a rabbit, and together all 3 of them take it down. He's very grateful they were able to catch it. Been no rain for a while, so there is kind of a prey shortage going on. Quote, Sandstorm skidded to a halt beside Fireheart as he crouched over the rabbit. He could hear her panting. His own breath was coming in gasps, too. Thanks, she meowed. I'm a bit slow today. Me too, Fireheart admitted. You need a rest, Sandstorm meowed gently. We all do. Fireheart felt the warmth of her soft green gaze. But you've been twice as busy as everyone else. There's a lot to do, Fireheart forced himself to add. And I don't have to spend time training Cloudpaw anymore. Cloudpaw's loss disturbed him more and more. He had been half hoping the young cat would turn up at the camp, having found his way back on his own, but there had been no sign of him since the monster had taken him away. As Fireheart began to give up hope of ever seeing his apprentice again, his awareness that he'd lost 2 apprentices, Cinderpelt as well as Cloudpaw, wreathed his mind in thorns. How could he take on the responsibilities of deputy when he couldn't handle his duties as a mentor? By giving himself more patrols and hunting missions than any other cat, Fireheart knew that he was trying to prove himself to the rest of the clan, and to push away his own private doubts about his abilities as a warrior. Sandstorm seemed to sense Fireheart's anxiety. I know there's a lot to do. Perhaps I can help more. She glanced up at him, and Fireheart thought he detected a tiny hint of bitterness in her mew as she added, After all, I don't have an apprentice either. Seeing Dustpelt with Ashpaw must have pricked at her pride, and Fireheart felt a twinge of guilt. I'm sorry, he began. But tiredness had clouded his brain, and he realized too late that Sandstorm would have no idea that he had chosen the mentors. She would have assumed, along with the rest of the clan, that Bluestar had made the decision. Sandstorm stared at him, bewildered. Sorry about what? Bluestar asked me to choose the mentors for Fernpaw and Ashpaw, Fireheart confessed. And I chose Dustpelt instead of you. He anxiously searched Sandstorm's face for a trace of irritation, but she gazed steadily back at him. You'll make a great mentor one day, he went on, desperate to explain. But I had to choose Dust. It's okay, she shrugged. I'm sure you had your reasons. Her tone was casual, but Fireheart couldn't help noticing the fur prickling along her spine. An awkward silence stretched between them until Brightpaw pushed her way out of the undergrowth behind them. Did you get it? She panted. Suddenly Fireheart realized how tired the apprentice looked, and remembered how hard it had been to keep up with the bigger, stronger warriors when he was training. He nudged the dead rabbit toward Brightpaw with his nose. Here, you have first bite, he offered. I should have given you time to eat before we left camp. As Brightpaw gratefully began to eat, Sandstorm caught his eye. Perhaps you could order fewer patrols? She suggested doubtfully. Everyone's so tired, and we haven't seen Tigerclaw since Running Wind died. Fireheart felt a twinge of regret. He knew she couldn't really believe her hopeful words. The whole of ThunderClan knew that Tigerclaw would not give up so easily. Fireheart had seen the tension in the warriors' lean bodies as they patrolled with him, their ears always pricked, their mouths always open, tasting the air for danger. He had also sensed their growing frustration with their leader, who was needed more than ever to unite her clan against this invisible threat. But Bluestar had hardly left her den since the vigil for Running Wind. We can't cut down our patrols, Fireheart told Sandstorm. We need to be on our guard. Do you really think Tigerclaw will kill us? Brightpaw mewed, looking up from her meal. I think he'll try. What does Bluestar think? Sandstorm asked the question tentatively. She's worried, of course. Fireheart knew he was being evasive. Only he and Whitestorm understood how completely Tigerclaw's return had swept Bluestar back into the dark and tortured place she had been in after the treacherous warrior had tried to murder her. She's lucky she has such a good deputy, Sandstorm meowed. Every cat in the clan trusts you to lead us through this. Fireheart couldn't help glancing away. He had been well aware of the way the other cats had been looking at him lately, with a mixture of hope and expectancy. He felt honored to have their respect, but he knew he was young and inexperienced, and he longed for Whitestorm's unshakable faith in his StarClan-led destiny. He hoped he was worthy of the clan's trust. "I'll do my best," he promised. "The clan couldn't ask for more than that," Sandstorm murmured. So, they head on towards Four Trees silently, keeping an eye out for Tigerclaw. A strange scent appears, and they all instantly tense up, because they believe it could be the rogues. Fireheart directs them up into a tree, peering down to see who the intruder is, telling them to stay quiet. Quote, Fireheart saw a shadow weaving through the ferns, dark and slender. 2 black ears poked above the fronds. There was something about the shape of them that stirred a distant memory, not unpleasant. Was it a cat that they had helped from one of the other clans? But with Tigerclaw's dark, plotting presence in the forest, there was no way of knowing which cats were to be trusted. All strangers were enemies. Fireheart flexed his claws, preparing to pounce. Beside him, Sandstorm quivered with anticipation, and Brightpaw stared down, her small shoulders tense. As the stranger patted under the ash tree, Fireheart let out a vicious yowl and dropped onto its back. The black cat screeched with surprise and rolled over, knocking Fireheart to the ground. Fireheart leaped nimbly to his paws. He had felt the size and strength of this cat in his first pounce, and he knew it would be easy to chase off. He faced the cat, arching his back, and gave a warning hiss. Sandstorm leaped down from the tree, Brightpaw right behind her, and Fireheart saw the black cat's eyes widen in panic as it realized it was outnumbered. But Fireheart was already letting the fur lie flat on his shoulders. His first instinct had been right. He recognized this intruder. And from the look on the cat's face, which had turned from panic to relief in a single heartbeat, the intruder recognized Fireheart too. "Who's that warrior?" "It's..." Chapter 19. Quote, "Ravenpaw!" Fireheart sprang forward to give his old friend a welcoming nuzzle. "It's so good to see you, Fireheart." Ravenpaw nudged him in return and turned his eyes to Sandstorm. "And can this really be Sandpaw?" "Sandstorm," the ginger she-cat corrected him sharply. "Of course. The last time I saw you, you were half the size." The Black Tom's eyes narrowed. "How's Dustpaw?" Fireheart understood Ravenpaw's wary tone. Sandstorm and Dustpelt had trained at the same time as him, and had viewed Ravenpaw more as a rival than a denmate. When Ravenpaw had fled from his mentor Tigerclaw and gone to live in the two-leg territory beyond the uplands, Dustpaw and Sandpaw had not been sad to see him go. Fireheart doubted that Ravenpaw had missed them either. "Dustpelt's fine," Sandstorm shrugged. "He has his own apprentice now." "And is this one your apprentice?" Ravenpaw asked, looking at Brightpaw. Fireheart felt his ears twitch as Sandstorm answered curtly, "I don't have an apprentice yet. This is Whitestorm's. Her name is Brightpaw." The warm breeze ruffled the leaves at the top of the trees. Fireheart glanced up at the noise. This unexpected meeting had disarmed him, and he let his guard slip. He scanned the undergrowth warily as he remembered the threat of Tigerclaw and his band of rogues. "What are you doing here, Ravenpaw?" he asked urgently. Ravenpaw, who had been studying Sandstorm with a curious expression in his amber eyes, turned his head. "Looking for you." "Really? Why?" Fireheart knew it had to be important for Ravenpaw to come back to the forest. The young black cat had lived in constant fear after he had accidentally witnessed Tigerclaw killing Redtail, the ThunderClan deputy. When Tigerclaw had tried to kill Ravenpaw too, to keep him quiet, Fireheart and Graystripe had helped their friend escape. Ravenpaw now lived on a two-leg farm with Barley, another loner, a cat who wasn't a kitty pet, nor part of a forest clan. Ravenpaw must have a very good reason for returning to his old enemy's territory now. After all, he had no way of knowing that Tigerclaw's treachery had been revealed and he had been driven out of ThunderClan. As far as Ravenpaw knew, Tigerclaw was still the deputy. Ravenpaw flicked his tail uneasily. "A cat has come to live on the edge of my territory," he began. Fireheart stared at him, confused, and Ravenpaw tried to explain. "I found him while I was out hunting. He was scared and lost. He didn't say much, but he smelled of ThunderClan." "ThunderClan?" Fireheart echoed. "I asked him if he had come over the uplands, but he didn't seem to have any idea where he was. So I took him back to the two-leg nest where he said he was living." "So he was a kitty pet?" Sandstorm was staring intently at the black cat. "Are you sure it was ThunderClan you smelled on him?" "I wouldn't forget the scent I was born to," Ravenpaw retorted. "And he didn't seem like the usual sort of kitty pet. In fact, he didn't seem at all pleased to be back with his two legs." A glimmer of excitement sparked in Fireheart's belly, but he forced himself to stay silent until Ravenpaw had finished his story. "I couldn't get a scent out of my mind. I went back to the two-leg nest to speak to him again, but he was shut in. I tried to talk to him through a window, but the two-leg chased me away." "What color was this cat?" Fireheart felt Sandstorm glance sharply at him. "White," replied Ravenpaw. "He had a fluffy white pelt." "But that sounds like Cloudpaw." It was Brightpaw who spoke. "Then you know him?" Ravenpaw meowed. "Was I right? Is he a ThunderClan cat?" Fireheart hardly heard Ravenpaw's words. Cloudpaw was safe? He began to circle his old friend, his paws tingling with joy and relief. "Was he okay? What did he say?" "Well," stammered Ravenpaw, turning his head to follow Fireheart as he patted around him. "Like I said, the first time I met him he seemed utterly lost. That's not surprising. He's never been outside ThunderClan territory before." Fireheart weaved impatiently around Sandstorm and Brightpaw. "He hasn't made his journey to Highstones yet. There's no way he'd know he was so close to home." Sandstorm nodded, and Ravenpaw remarked, "That would explain why he was so upset. He must have thought—" "Upset?" Fireheart stopped pacing. Why? Was he hurt? No, Ravenpaw mewed quickly. He just seemed really miserable. I thought he'd cheer up when I showed him the way back to his two-leg nest, but he still seemed unhappy. That's why I came to find you. Fireheart looked down at his paws, hardly knowing what to think. He realized that he had been hoping that Cloudpaw would be happy in his new life, even if Fireheart never saw him again. Ravenpaw blinked uncertainly. Did I do the right thing in coming here? He meowed. Has this, Cloudpaw been banished from the clan? Fireheart gravely met Ravenpaw's gaze. The black cat had risked his life coming here. He deserved an explanation. Cloudpaw was stolen from the forest by two legs, Fireheart began. He was my apprentice, and my sister's son. He's been missing for a quarter moon. I was beginning to think I'd never see him again. Sandstorm glanced quizzically at Fireheart. What makes you think you are going to see him again? He's living in Ravenpaw's territory with two legs. I'm going to go and get him, Fireheart declared. Go and get him? Why? You heard Ravenpaw. He's not happy. Are you sure he wants rescuing? Wouldn't you? Fireheart countered. I wouldn't need rescuing. I wouldn't have been taking food from two legs in the first place, Sandstorm pointed out sharply. There was a startled grunt from Ravenpaw, but the black cat said nothing. It would be good to have him back in the den, Brightpaw put in, but Fireheart hardly heard her. He stared back at Sandstorm, the fur on his neck bristling with anger. You think Cloudpaw deserves to be left there, unhappy and alone? He spat. Just because he made a stupid mistake? Sandstorm snorted impatiently. That's not what I'm saying. You don't even know for sure if he wants to come back. Ravenpaw said he looked miserable, Fireheart insisted. But even as he spoke, doubt flickered through his mind. What if Cloudpaw had gotten used to kitty pet life by now? Ravenpaw only spoke to him once. Sandstorm turned to Ravenpaw. Did he look upset when you saw him through the two-leg window? Ravenpaw's whiskers twitched uncomfortably. It's hard to say. He was eating. Sandstorm whipped her head back to Fireheart. He's got a home, he's got food, and you still think he needs rescuing. What about the clan? They need you. Cloudpaw sounds like he's safe. I say leave him there. Bro, why is she doing this? After helping him with Cloudpaw earlier in the book? What are we doing? Like, why? I get that it's true, like, Fireheart does need to look after the clan and prioritize that, but, I mean, last we saw Cloudpaw, he was screaming for help. He was clearly not wanting to be taken by the two legs, so they should go rescue him. Fireheart stared at Sandstorm. The fur across her shoulders was bristling, and her eyes glittered with determination. With a sinking feeling, Fireheart realized that she was right. How could he leave the clan now, even for a short while, with Bluestar so weak and Tigerclaw and his band of rogues threatening them, all for the sake of a cat who had already proved to be a lazy, greedy apprentice? But still, his heart told him he had to try. He couldn't give up on his belief that Cloudpaw would make a great warrior one day, and the clan needed all the warriors it could get right now. I have to go, he meowed simply. And what if you do manage to bring him back? Sandstorm argued. Will he be safe in the forest? Fireheart felt a cold shiver run along his spine. Could he bear to bring Cloudpaw home, only to see him slaughtered by Tigerclaw? But even as uncertainty prickled in his paws, he knew what he was going to do. I'll be back by sunhigh tomorrow, he meowed. Tell Whitestorm where I've gone. Alarm stretched Sandstorm's eyes wide. You're going right now? I'll need Ravenpaw to show me where he is, and I can't expect him to hang around in the forest, he explained. Not with Tigerclaw on the loose. Ravenpaw's tail fluffed up with sudden fear. What do you mean, on the loose? Sandstorm shot Fireheart a wry look. Come on, Fireheart meowed to the black cat. I'll explain as we go. The sooner we get moving, the better. You're not going without me, Sandstorm told him. It's a mouse-brain journey, but you'll need all the help you can get if you bump into Tigerclaw or a Wind Clan patrol. Fireheart felt a surge of joy at Sandstorm's words. He glanced gratefully at her and turned to face Brightpaw. Will you go back to the camp and tell Whitestorm where we've gone? He asked the apprentice. He knows Ravenpaw. Brightpaw's eyes flashed with alarm, but she blinked it away and dipped her head. Of course. Go straight back home and keep your ears low, Fireheart ordered her, feeling a twinge of worry at leaving the young cat to travel alone. I'll take care, Brightpaw promised him earnestly. She turned and vanished into the undergrowth. Fireheart pushed away his anxiety about the apprentice and began to trek through the ferns. Sandstorm and Ravenpaw fell into step beside him, and he was reminded of all the times he had hunted in the forest with Ravenpaw and Greystripe. But as the stifling forest air pressed down on him and his fur prickled with anticipation of the journey ahead, he couldn't help wondering if he was leading them all into disaster. So what's happened to Tigerclaw? Ravenpaw broke the silence without slowing his pace. Fireheart had often looked forward to telling Ravenpaw that his old tormentor had been exposed at last. But now it seemed there was only darkness in the news about Tigerclaw's treachery and banishment, and, since he had killed Runningwind, Fireheart stumbled over the story with a heart that ached with bitterness and regret. Ravenpaw stopped dead in his tracks. He killed Runningwind? Fireheart stopped too and nodded heavily. Tigerclaw leads a band of rogues now, and he's sworn to kill us all. But who would follow such a leader? Some of them are Broken Tail's old friends, who were exiled with him when we drove him out of ShadowClan. Fireheart paused, forcing himself to revisit the scene of the recent battle on his mind. But there were other cats that I hadn't seen before. I don't know where they've come from. So Tigerclaw is more powerful than ever, Ravenpaw mewed darkly. No, Fireheart spat. He's an outcast now, not a warrior. He has no clan. StarClan must oppose him as long as he breaks the warrior code. Without a clan or the warrior code to support him, there's no way Tigerclaw can defeat ThunderClan. Fireheart fell silent, realizing that he had spoken with a conviction he had hardly been aware of until now. Sandstorm was staring proudly at him. Oh my god, she loves Hero Fireheart. She's so moody this episode. I hope you're right, Ravenpaw meowed. Me too, thought Fireheart. He began to pad onward once more, narrowing his eyes against the glaring sun. Of course he's right, Sandstorm insisted, following. Ravenpaw fell into step beside Sandstorm. Well, I'm just glad I'm out of it. She glanced at him accusingly. Don't you miss clan life at all? I did in the beginning, Ravenpaw admitted. But now I have a new home, and I like it there. I've got Barley for company if I want, and that's plenty for me. I'd rather have that than Tigerclaw any day. Sandstorm's eyes glittered. How do you know he won't come looking for you? Ravenpaw's ears twitched. Tigerclaw has no idea where you are, Fireheart told him quickly. He flashed a warning glance at Sandstorm. Come on, let's get out of WindClan territory. She's being so weird. Sandstorm is being so weird. Her prejudice is showing this episode against, kitty pets and stuff. Finally, they make it across WindClan territory. Fireheart's pelt grows hot from the lack of shade. They make it to the woods at the Two-Leg place close to Ravenpaw's barn. Ravenpaw warns them that they can't stay around long because Two-Legs walk their dogs around this time of day. And it's getting towards the evening time a little bit. Quote, the barley in the field beyond the hedge stretched high above their heads. Instead of skirting the edge, Ravenpaw headed straight into the forest of crackling stems. Fireheart and Sandstorm weaved after him, hurrying so they didn't lose sight of the black cat's tail flicking ahead of them. Fireheart felt a ripple of unease as he realized he could never find his way out alone. He had lost all sense of direction, with nothing to see but the endless golden stems and a strip of clear blue sky above. He was very relieved when they finally emerged and sat down to rest under the hedge on the far side of the field. They were making good progress. The sun was already halfway down the sky, and the uplands were already far behind them. Fireheart smelled a familiar scent on the hedge beside him. Your marker, he commented to Ravenpaw. This is where my territory begins. Ravenpaw swung his head around, signaling that the wide sweep of fields ahead of them was where he lived and hunted. Then Cloudpaw's near here? Asked Sandstorm, sniffing warily. There's a dip on the other side of that rise, Ravenpaw told her, pointing with his nose. The two-leg nest is there. Fireheart suddenly felt the fur on his spine tingle. What was that smell? He froze and opened his mouth to let the scent reach the glands inside. Beside him, Ravenpaw had lifted his nose, his black ears pricked, and his tail flicking nervously. His eyes widened in alarm. Dogs! He hissed. Ruh-roh! That's the end of chapter 19, and that's where we're gonna stop for today. Oh, wow. Wowzers. Yeah, sorry for the cliffhanger. That's just... that is just how the book timing ended up. Very interesting. But the Cloudpaw's safe. That's really good. Hopefully, if they rescue him successfully, he'll learn his lesson and not be a piece of work. But yeah, that's it for today. Thank you guys for listening. I am about to drive 30 minutes away to go find the new Warrior Cats book, Chasing Shadows, in the Changing Skies arc. It's releasing today, March 31st, and the Barnes & Noble that's closest to my house doesn't have it, so I'm gonna go drive and do that now, because I must collect every book. Alright, thank you guys for listening, and may StarClan light your path.